Hi, welcome to Sean's workshop. Today I thought I'd talk about the most important tool that I have in my workshop, and that's my workbench. This is a workbench I'd built probably 6-7 years ago, and it's came in quite handy. I've used it a lot. It's basically the centerpiece of all my woodworking projects that I do. Let me walk through some of the features that I have and then also some of the accessories that I use for this workbench. So the first thing is the base of the workbench. You can see I've glued up here these are actually oak pieces of wood, and I think they were 8/4, and I glued a couple of them together to make the actual leg here. Ends up being about 3.5 inches square with the two pieces glued together and then planed down to that dimension. I've got obviously 4 of those for the legs. Down here you can see I've got a stretcher that goes across both sides and then also both ends to kind of tie the legs together there. And then I've also got a stretcher that goes across the top. You can see that here and here across the top on either side. Now that's basically the base, and everything is mortised into these legs here, all the cross pieces on the ends, the bottom there, and then I've got a shelf that I've glued together. It's actually a couple pieces of plywood, I believe, that I'd glued together and then just put edge banding on there to make it look somewhat nice. But that works great for extra storage, and also you can put weight on there to actually give some weight to the bench. Also works great. Here's the Moxon Vise that I had talked about a few weeks back. I have that I store there and use that on top of the bench. As far as the top itself is concerned, to make this sturdy and solid, I've actually glued up 3 pieces of plywood. I believe I used Baltic birch plywood. So the actual thickness of the top with those 3 pieces, they're 3/4 inch pieces glued together. It ends up being about 2¼ inches deep, and then with this hardboard on top, that adds another 1/4 inch. So the total top thickness of the main bench is 2.5 inches. And using plywood, a couple things, it keeps it sturdy with the additional weight because plywood is heavy. And then also it keeps it stable as far as movement, and it keeps the top flat. You want to make sure that you have a top flat, especially if you're doing a lot of planing and just assembly. It's nice to have a nice, strong, sturdy, and flat top. Also, if I need to replace this hardboard, I could easily do that by taking a router and just routing it out. It is glued actually to the plywood, all 3 pieces of plywood to get the total thickness. They're all glued together, and so is the hardboard. But if worse came to worse and I needed to replace this, I figure I could use a router to route it out that 1/4 inch thickness and put a new top in here. But as you can see, it's lasted for, like I said, I think I built this in 2019, so it's lasted me at least 6 years thus far. There's a little bit of wear, but I keep coating it every once in a while with some Danish oil just to keep the top nice. With that, you can see that I purchased actually a used bench vise here. I got this when unfortunately a high school was closing their industrial arts division. So I purchased this on their auction. So it's a nice vise that I picked up. It actually had a metal handle. I replaced it with a wood because I prefer the wood handles. And then I also made the face of the vise. I made cut a piece of oak plywood or oak wood here to make the face of that to give it some thickness. And you can see it's also the same thickness as the top. The apron of this bench you can see is 4 inches thick. And then the sides, or the thickness of the apron this way, the depth of it, is 2 3/4 inch pieces basically glued together. A little bit more than that. They were probably 7/8 inch each. And then I did that both on the ends, basically around the whole perimeter of the bench top. That way you're not seeing the oak, or the plywood, I should say. And that also gives it some thickness, also gives it a nice place to put clamps if you want to clamp something like I did the Moxon Vise in the previous video. You can see that it works great for clamping that way. So this is the tail vise, and then you can see that in the wood piece of it, I actually cut some holes here for the bench dogs, and then you can still see my mark here that I drew a line all the way down the top of the bench and drilled 3/4 inch holes on 2 places right on the edge here, which having these bench dog holes on the edge works great for planing. That way you're not standing way back here and working in the middle of the bench. I can clamp a board here, whatever length. Typically I don't go quite as long as this bench, but I can clamp the board here and I can stand on the side here and plane the board. By doing that, a lot of times only this one bench dog, and the opposite side of it is being clamped, which leaves this one with no wood to clamp in. So this is a nice handy deal that I got off the internet from a company. You can actually lay this on your vise and it'll take up that gap so that your vise isn't clamping crooked. Here you'd have your wood that's clamped. I can actually use this as an example here. Here's a piece of wood. In other words, if I clamp this between these bench dogs, you can see this side of the vise is starting to pull in. You can actually use this to take up that gap and actually have that, if I get the right amount here, and actually have that to clamp so the vise doesn't rack on you. So this is one accessory that works great. Along with this vise, you can see this tail vise, I would call, I guess, this a tail vise or an end vise. And then I've got this big vise down here as well. This works great if I want to clamp a long board on its edge and plane the edge of it. I can clamp it on this end and then just take a wood clamp, and clamp the other end here to hold this end up, and I can, plane the edge of the board the long way along here. So this vise also works well. Obviously you can use, I'll use the same accessory if I happen to use the short. You can see I've got bench dog holes in this vise and then going this way as well. I also have this third vise. I don't use it a lot, but I had it laying around, so I thought I might as well make use of it. And I put another vise here, and you can see I've got a couple, I've got this roll lined up with the built-in bench dog that's right in this vise. So I sometimes use that, not a whole lot. It's mainly this vise here and on the end that I use the most. Speaking of other accessories for this, it's great to have these, to use these devices here for clamping. You use a hold fast, basically, is what they're called. And for clamping the wood, that makes it nice and solid and quick and easy. And to release, you just hit the hold fast and it comes right off. So that's a great accessory. Here's a couple other accessories that I had purchased online. They also work like an end clamp. If I want to have something that's a little lower profile, or for some reason this doesn't work, I can use this to also clamp. And then here's another style of that same type of accessory. Does basically the same thing, but it's a little shorter. So these are a couple more accessories that I use with this bench. What else can I say? Oh, with the weight, those are basically, a lot of those cases there are empty, so there's really not a lot of weight on the shelf there. But as you can see, if I push, this bench is very solid, and that makes, because of the plywood that I used, that adds a lot of weight to this. Also, to help and to keep things from sliding around, on the bottom I put some rubber pads. So on the bottom of each of these legs, so that also helps grip on my concrete floor here in the shop. So again, when you're planing, there's no movement in this bench whatsoever. So that's also a nice thing to have. And then one of the last accessories that I'll talk about here are these rollers that you can get at most woodworking stores. You just step on these. I'm not going to do it now, but you can step on these, and that'll raise the bench up. I've got 4 of them, 1 on each leg, and then I can roll this around and move it because it is heavy. So you don't want to lift that around. As far as how I attached it, it's basically through these top aprons up here. I've got basically only one leg screw, so that give it a little movement if it needs to move, but again, it's plywood, so you're not going to have much wood movement. But that's how I actually attach the top of the bench to the bottom leg assembly. Other than that, I think that's pretty much it. Again, thanks for watching the video. If you want to see more videos like this, please click on this button over here, and also like and subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate it. Thank you.